In 2026, life will not reward the loud, the scattered, or the restless, but those who understand the power of turning inward and strengthening their inner foundation, because every divine shift begins inside before it appears outside. When you stop chasing validation and begin cultivating inner clarity, the atmosphere around you starts to change without you forcing it. God moves the loud obstacles out of the way for those who choose to be inwardly aligned rather than outwardly impressive. The world shouts for attention, but destiny unfolds in silence because silence sharpens vision. When you focus on yourself, you break free from distractions that were only designed to delay your purpose. Your energy becomes concentrated, your thinking becomes precise, and your spirit becomes sensitive to the whispers of divine direction. This is why the coming year demands focus, because what is ahead requires a stronger you, not a busier you. The noise around you cannot stop you unless the noise within you stays louder, and that is why God calls you to silence. The reason 2026 will elevate those who focus on themselves is because alignment requires separation, and separation requires silence. When you quiet the outside world, you create space to hear the guidance that has been waiting for your attention. Doors you've prayed for do not respond to panic, worry, or noise. They respond to inner order and disciplined peace. When your mind becomes calm, your decisions become sharp, and your path becomes clearer. Everything that once confused you begins to make sense when you stop rushing and start listening. In silence, you discover truths about yourself that noise never allowed you to hear. You begin to see where you've been leaking energy and where you must redirect your strength. Silence doesn't remove opportunities, it reveals the ones that were always meant for you. God does not elevate the distracted, He elevates the prepared, and preparation begins with internal focus. Many people step into a new year hoping life will shift without realizing that transformation is an internal process, not an external event. You cannot walk into the future God designed for you while carrying last year's noise, fear, and scattered intentions. Focusing on yourself is not selfishness. It is stewardship of your destiny. You must guard your time, protect your energy, and choose your thoughts intentionally, because everything you produce in 2026 will flow from the condition of your inner world. When you stop explaining yourself to people who cannot see your calling, your growth accelerates. When you stop fighting battles that distract you, your strength multiplies. There is a spiritual maturity required for what is coming, and that maturity is born in silence, reflection, and inner discipline. You must learn to listen to your own spirit again, because the wisdom you seek is already within you, waiting for your attention. In the quiet spaces of your life, you will realize that God has been guiding you all along, but you were too surrounded by noise to notice the direction. Focus brings illumination. Suddenly, you see your habits clearly, your patterns clearly, your purpose clearly, and the path forward clearly. The distractions that once tempted you lose their power when your vision becomes stronger than your impulses. The fears that once controlled you weaken when your spirit becomes anchored. When you stop allowing the world to pull you in 1,000 directions, your energy gathers, condenses, and becomes a force. People will wonder how you changed so quickly, but they will never understand the quiet battles you conquered alone. You are not being called to silence because you are weak. You are being called to silence because you are being prepared for something greater. The world will see the results, but only you will know the depth of the inner work that produced them. The year 2026 is not coming to test your strength. It is coming to reward your focus, your discipline, and your willingness to withdraw from noise and step into clarity. Those who scatter their attention across meaningless conversations, draining habits, and constant comparison will feel lost, while those who turn inward will step into acceleration. Focus is a spiritual law. What you consistently give your attention to eventually grows. If you give your attention to fear, fear expands. If you give your attention to purpose, purpose multiplies. The silence God calls you to is not emptiness, it is construction. In that silence, you will rebuild your confidence, restructure your thinking, and renew your spiritual fire. You will finally see why the noise had to stop, why the distractions had to fall away, and why the focus had to intensify. Everything God is preparing for you requires a version of you strong enough to carry it. Silence becomes a powerful force when you finally understand that not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every movement needs an audience, because true transformation is always born in secrecy before it manifests in the open. When you stop announcing your plans, you remove the influence of doubt that comes from people who cannot see what God placed inside you. Growth requires privacy because fragile visions are easily crushed by careless opinions. Your evolution needs room to breathe, and silence gives you that sacred space. You begin to recognize that your journey is far too important to be explained to minds that are not ready to understand it. When you guard your progress, your momentum increases because no one is slowing you down with their fears. People often drain your energy not through confrontation, but through constant access. And silence protects you from that slow leak. The less you share, the more you build. The quieter you become, the more power you hold. There comes a moment in every life when God tells you to withdraw from unnecessary conversations so that you can reconnect with your original assignment, the purpose that was once clear but became clouded by the voices of others. Silence removes emotional clutter, clears mental fog, and quiets the chaos around you so your spirit can finally breathe again. It is in that stillness that your real guidance returns, the kind that cannot be found in noise, comparison, or external validation. Many people lose their destiny not because they lack potential, but because they leaked their vision to the wrong ears. When you stop speaking, you stop giving people the power to shape your direction. Silence is not passive. It is strategic, purposeful, and deeply spiritual. It protects you from being influenced, misled, or drained by those who misunderstand your assignment. What grows in silence grows strong. What grows in secrecy grows stable. What grows without interference grows unstoppable. You begin to realize that the greatest breakthroughs often come when you stop explaining your intentions and start embodying them, because actions speak with an authority that words can never carry. People may question your silence, but they will never question the results that come from it. You are choosing inner strength over external approval, and that choice accelerates your growth more than any external motivation ever could. Silence forces you to confront your real self, the one behind the mask, the one behind the expectations, the one behind the noise of daily life. You start seeing where you've been holding yourself back through overthinking, oversharing, and over-explaining. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your vulnerability or your vision, You reclaim your personal power by refusing to let others dictate your pace or your direction. Silence is where your self-respect deepens, your boundaries strengthen, and your confidence rebuilds from the inside out. When you stop speaking about your goals, your energy stops scattering and begins to concentrate, creating a laser-like focus that pushes you toward levels of achievement you never thought possible. Every distraction loses its grip because your inner voice becomes louder than external noise. You begin to understand that silence is not about hiding. It's about building without disruption. It's about realizing that growth is not a performance but a process. People see the final product, not the nights you spent alone working on your craft, healing your wounds, or confronting your limitations. Silence teaches you discipline, and discipline is the gateway to mastery. Applause, you Orleans who stop ACILI, teeing TED fearing feploxeritism, and that mental freedom becomes a turning point in your life. You are not running from the world. You are rising above it by refusing to tie your progress to their opinions. You will discover that silence strengthens your spiritual sensitivity because your heart becomes less reactive to noise and more receptive to divine direction. When the world grows quiet around you, you start to hear the whisper of intuition more clearly, guiding you with clarity and precision. You begin to sense when to move, when to wait, when to speak, and when to stay still. You will realize that silence gives you an advantage because most people act from impulse while you act from alignment. This alignment brings peace in decisions, power in actions, and purpose in movement. The less you speak, the more you observe, and the more you observe, the smarter your choices become. You begin seeing patterns, motives, energy, and truth that noise once hid from you. Silence trains your spirit to rise above drama and your mind to see beyond confusion. It is not withdrawal, it is elevation. When you embrace silence, you no longer waste energy on proving yourself, defending your choices, or justifying your growth to those who never intended to support it. You learn to walk away without explaining, to rise without announcing, and to transform without confessing every detail of your process. You give yourself the permission to evolve quietly and freely, without waiting for someone's approval to take your next step. Your silence becomes a shield that protects your peace and a fortress that guards your destiny. You begin to value privacy in a world obsessed with exposure. You begin to appreciate solitude in a world addicted to noise. You begin to fall in love with your own company because you finally recognize that everything you need to rise is already within you. Silence doesn't isolate you, it prepares you for the season you are about to walk into. A season where your results will speak for you louder than your words ever could. There is a battle within every human being, a battle that determines whether their future will be fueled by strength or drained by scattered impulses, because every decision you make shapes the direction of your energy. You begin to understand that your destiny is not stolen by enemies or circumstances, but by the habits that quietly consume your inner fire. When you constantly give in to impulses, desires, and momentary pleasures, you weaken the deeper part of yourself that was designed for greatness. You start to notice that your confidence shrinks when your energy is wasted, and your clarity dims when your focus is scattered. The battle is not outside you. It is the internal struggle between the part that seeks discipline and the part that seeks indulgence. When you choose discipline, you reclaim authority over your own life. When you choose discipline, your spirit strengthens, your vision sharpens, and your motivation rises. Those who win this battle rise above their old patterns with power. Every person has a spiritual reservoir of energy that determines their creativity, purpose, drive, and emotional strength. And this reservoir is either preserved or drained by the choices they make daily. When you spend your strength on distractions and compulsive habits, you diminish the power you need to build your future. It is not just time you lose, it's clarity, momentum, and spiritual awareness. The mind becomes dull when energy is wasted carelessly, and anxiety grows when your spirit is not aligned with your intentions. But when you protect your energy, you start to awaken dormant gifts within yourself. You begin to sense opportunities more clearly and recognize distractions more quickly. You walk with intention because you finally feel connected to your purpose. Protecting your energy is not about deprivation. It's about honoring your calling. It is about saying no to what weakens you and yes to what strengthens you. The truth is that most people never step into their highest potential because they pour their strength into behaviors that momentarily satisfy but ultimately weaken their courage and identity. They do not realize they are trading long-term power for short-term relief. When you feed an impulse, you starve your purpose. When you give in to temporary comfort, you lose long-term growth. But when you learn to master your urges and redirect them into creativity, discipline, and progress, something extraordinary happens within you. Your mind becomes clearer, your spirit becomes stronger, and your identity becomes more rooted in who you truly are. You stop feeling scattered and start feeling grounded. You stop feeling empty and start feeling empowered. You realize that the habits you defeat are not small battles. They are the foundations of your destiny. Energy governs everything you do, and when your energy is misdirected, your life becomes fragmented. But when your energy is disciplined, your life becomes powerful and aligned. You begin to feel a new level of inner strength when you stop letting the world pull you in every direction. You feel more present, more confident, and more capable. Your self-respect grows because you are no longer controlled by impulses, but guided by intention. You start waking up with a clearer mind, stronger willpower, and a deeper sense of spiritual connection. So, RTIFICIAL highs and begins for someone to eero up and fix what your experience, what the natural afraidly to face elevation that comes from living in alignment. The discipline you once resisted becomes the freedom you now cherish. Your spirit rises because you are no longer wasting the very fuel that God gave you to fulfill your destiny. You will discover that every time you resist a draining habit, you gain back a piece of yourself, your strength, your creativity, your vision, your enthusiasm for life. You start feeling powerful in your own body and secure in your own decisions. You begin noticing the difference between what builds you and what breaks you. There is a spiritual clarity that enters your life when you stop letting impulses dominate your actions. You begin hearing your intuition more clearly because the noise within you is finally quiet. You begin trusting yourself more deeply because your choices now reflect your purpose, not your weakness. You realize that energy is a sacred currency, and your future depends on how you spend it. Those who discipline their energy rise above the limitations that once controlled them. There is nothing more powerful than a person who has learned to direct their inner fire toward meaningful goals instead of wasting it on temporary sensations. Such a person becomes unstoppable because their strength is not random. It is focused, intentional, and grounded. They do not crumble under pressure because their foundation is solid. They do not quit when faced with difficulty because their spirit is alive. They do not depend on external motivation because their internal energy is abundant and disciplined. When you master your impulses, you master your destiny. When you protect your strength, you protect your future. Everything you desire, success, peace, clarity, purpose flows from the energy you preserve, nurture, and direct. The discipline you build today becomes the power you walk with tomorrow. Self-mastery is the quiet transformation that no one sees but everyone eventually feels, because the person who conquers their inner world becomes unshakable in the outer world. When you learn to restrain your impulses, manage your emotions, and discipline your habits, something powerful awakens inside you. You stop being controlled by moods or influenced by pressures that once broke you. You rise above the noise because you now operate from intention rather than reaction. You begin to recognize how much strength was always within you, waiting for you to choose it. The moment you decide to master yourself is the moment you stop negotiating with your excuses. You step into a version of yourself that no longer sabotages your own destiny, and that inner shift becomes the foundation of every victory that follows. Self-mastery teaches you that greatness is not the result of luck or talent, but the fruit of daily choices that align with a higher purpose. You realize that what you allow becomes what you live, and what you tolerate becomes what you become. The discipline you practice today shapes the person you see in the mirror tomorrow. You start noticing that the old habits you once defended were the same habits that held you back from your calling. You begin replacing comfort with commitment because you finally understand that destiny requires sacrifice. Self-mastery is not about controlling everything around you. It is about controlling what happens within you. When your inner life becomes ordered, your outer life begins to reflect that order. The chaos that once surrounded you loses power because you no longer contribute to it with a chaotic mind. A person who learns to govern their thoughts becomes a person who governs their life, because thoughts are the architects of reality. When you begin to discipline your mind, you stop feeding yourself negativity, doubt, fear, and insecurity. You start replacing old narratives with new truths that strengthen your identity. You no longer allow destructive thoughts to run unchecked because you understand their power to shape your choices. You take responsibility for your emotions, not by suppressing them, but by directing them wisely. You recognize that your mind becomes your greatest enemy when left undisciplined, but becomes your greatest ally when trained. Self-mastery empowers you to think with clarity, act with intention, and move with confidence. Your life rises to the level of your thinking, and your thinking rises to the level of your discipline. A disciplined person becomes dangerous, not in a harmful way, but in a spiritually powerful way, because they can no longer be easily manipulated, distracted, or discouraged. They stop reacting to every emotion because they have learned to respond from wisdom. They stop entertaining every invitation to chaos because their peace has become too valuable. They stop chasing approval because they have developed inner certainty. People who lack self-mastery collapse under pressure, but those who cultivate discipline rise through it. Challenges no longer intimidate you because you have built strength within yourself. You carry a quiet power, a steady confidence, and an unshakable presence. Your resilience becomes your armor, and your discipline becomes your weapon against everything that tries to pull you backward. You begin to realize that self-mastery is not about perfection, but progression, not about rigidity, but alignment. Every time you choose consistency over comfort, you strengthen your future. Every time you delay gratification for something greater, you elevate your capacity. Every time you stand firm in the face of temptation, you build a foundation that cannot be easily broken. You become aware of the moments when your old self tries to return, but now you recognize it and refuse to surrender. You take charge of your time, your focus, and your emotional energy. You set boundaries that protect your purpose and eliminate patterns that weaken your spirit. You stop searching for motivation and start relying on discipline, because discipline is what carries you when motivation fades. When you master yourself, your spiritual sensitivity increases because you are no longer clouded by impulses or consumed by inner turmoil. You hear guidance more clearly because your mind is quiet enough to receive direction. You sense opportunities more quickly because your spirit is alert. You discern danger earlier because you are not distracted by chaos. You begin to move with divine timing because your inner world is aligned with higher direction. Purpose becomes easier to follow because your heart is no longer competing with undisciplined desires. Peace becomes natural because you are not fighting internal battles every day. You no longer sabotage relationships, assignments, or blessings because you have learned to manage the forces within you. Self-mastery ultimately transforms how you show up in the world because you no longer move from woundedness but from wisdom, not from desperation but from confidence, not from confusion but from clarity. You stop expecting others to fix what only you can heal. You stop waiting for perfect conditions because you now create momentum from within. You stop blaming circumstances because you recognize your personal power. Every area of your life elevates when you elevate yourself. Your presence becomes stronger, your voice becomes clearer, and your decisions become wiser. You walk with a quiet authority that cannot be explained, but can always be felt. A person who masters themselves becomes a person who masters their destiny.